With downtown in flux, what's the best way to reimagine the city so it meets everyone's needs? We'll talk about the possibilities. And Attorney General Dana Nessel on investigating the Oxford High School shooting and other priorities for 2025. Today is Sunday, January 12th. This is Flashpoint.
Hey there and welcome to Flashpoint. I'm Christy McDonald. So glad that you're with me on this Sunday morning. We are watching a lot this week. The fires out in Los Angeles. The word devastating doesn't even begin to describe the loss, and the struggle for containment continues. The country also said goodbye to President Jimmy Carter with a beautiful funeral at the National Cathedral. It's always really stunning to see all of the living presidents in one place. Back here at home, the Michigan legislators started back up again. We are getting our first look at what the agenda may be with the Republican majority working with the Democrat majority in the Senate. Seems like FOIA legislation, along with sick leave and minimum wage, will be getting a lot of time in the next few weeks. And as the Lions rest up, our love affair with cars is getting a lot of attention downtown this weekend with the auto show, which got me thinking about downtown development and a lot of the new projects that will mark Detroit's skyline in 2025. Office space, more living space and hotels, plus the Gordie Howe Bridge will open up. We're going to talk all about that. And then Michigan's Attorney General Dana Nessel is here with me today. We are going to talk about the investigation that her office will now start into the Oxford High School shooting 3 years later. What does that really mean? What kind of answers can the AG's office find that Oakland County couldn't? And then the pictures of the week. Stay put. Flashpoint starts right now. We are going to get started with Detroit development and where it's heading with our panel here today. So say hello to David DeRita. He is a principal at the Roxbury Group, which is a real estate development firm that has many pivotal projects here in Detroit. It's good to see you, David.
Nice to see you.
Next to him is Eric Larson, of course, the CEO of the Downtown Detroit Partnership, also the head of the Larson Realty Group. It's good to see you, Eric. Then over on my left, Sandy Brua. He is the CEO of the Detroit Regional Chamber. It's good to have all you here in this lovely January weekend that we have going on. But it really got me thinking when we look into 2025 and the changing skyline, I think, of the city of Detroit. And David, I want to start with you because you've got one of those projects that is helping change the skyline with the AC Hotel Detroit is at the Bonstel. Is that open yet, or what can you tell us?
T-minus 7 days.
Okay.
We'll be open on the 16th and ready for the Lions fans on the 18th.
No, not stressful at all. This has been a process.
Oh, yeah, we were skating to where the puck was. No, wrong analogy.
Yeah.
We were definitely planning for this, and I'm glad it worked out. Like I said, I'm not normally this rabid a Lions fan, but I was pretty glued to the set the other night when I knew it meant home games.
And you see a lot of now the hotels that are coming into view here, and the city absorbing and needing these rooms because of the people that are coming now, Sandy.
You know, if our friends from Visit Detroit were here today, they would tell you just they cannot keep up with the demand for conferences in Detroit. Hotel rooms are a big issue, but it's getting much better. In part thanks to what David is doing. But also, let's not forget that Detroit is getting its first 2 bona fide 5-star hotels. They're going to come online in the next 15 months. You know, the addition that's going to be in Dan's, Hudson Tower and the JW Marriott down by the water.
You know, Eric, when I think about how things have changed even in the last 5 years in the city, and a lot of the deliberate decisions that have had to been made. So when you think about the density, but still needing the park space and the recreation, but in this downtown area, what is your assessment of what you've seen happen over the last 5 years?
No, I really appreciate you saying that because it is, obviously an entire community that takes to get these things moving, and a lot of it is the environment in which people find themselves. Whether you're a visitor coming in for the first time or a resident living here every day, you want to know that you're in a place that's safe. You want to know that you're in a place that's clean. And you want to make sure that you have these great public spaces that allow you that respite outside of your built environment. So all of that has been taking place, and all of that has been very deliberate in terms of those investments that have been made. I do think it's very interesting, though. I mean, David is a great example where we're combining some of the best of what we have to offer in new construction with some of the incredible architecture that we have lasting here in the city. And the AC at Bonstel is is a perfect example of that. And we can sort of go through the city and look at that. And so this blend of, not only these great public spaces, but this great architecture and converting those great architecture pieces into other uses is a big part of what we've been doing.
So take us into some of that decision process, David, when you step back and say, this could be something viable, and how do we make it all? Say this could be an hour-long answer, too.
No,
but,
I'm not going to let it be. Don't ask us, because every time we look at a building, we think we could put a bar in there. But it's honestly, hospitality fits so well into the overall matrix of the downtown, and in a strange sense, we're rebuilding what was once our historic hospitality district. It really does grow around the theater district, historic theater district. LCA really just expanded the geography of that now. So now you're seeing the AC at the north end of the entertainment district in a section that might not have normally been thought of as a hospitality area. And what's coming behind that is the Thompson, our own conversion of the Plaza Midtown into Plaza Apartments by Marriott, which is a hospitality product, and others. So I think we've got good bones. What I can say is that for hospitality, and one other observation I always make, and I have to give credit to the DDP for its vigilance on public space, needless to say, is people come to Detroit all the time, and what they say is, you just don't see cities that look like this anymore. And what they mean is that this texture and not just walkability, but this combination of old and new, and how it all sort of seamlessly knits together here. And so that's just an advantage we have.
I just want to add to this about the whole public space thing. I mean, all the public space that Eric has led that has made our downtown so walkable, it actually extends into the buildings that David and others are doing. Think about Michigan Central. Right? That's exterior public space, but it's also now some amazing interior public space that is open to the public. That kind of indoor-outdoor public space aspect, I think we're doing exceptionally well.
And which is also then going to connect with the waterfront as well. And when we look at that and recreation and also hospitality, I want to also look at a conversion from office space to living, because that is something that is also, we have so much office space. Are we going to be able to support that kind of office space? And let me start with you on with that on Sandy.
The quick answer is that it's exceptionally difficult to convert most office space into residential, especially in older buildings. So does it pencil out, especially with the cost of construction so high? There was a lot of talk about, we can just, transform some of the towers of the RenCen into residential. Well, the answer to that question is really no, you can't. I mean, not at, there isn't enough demand at the prices that you'd need to charge to do that. So it has to be very building specific.
Yeah, and I think just to sort of build off of what Sandy's saying, we have had, and David mentioned this, we've got this incredible tapestry, we've got a great backdrop of amazing architecture, and there are over 29 older office buildings that have actually been repurposed into residential and hospitality. Yep. And David has done that with a number of them. The David Whitney, now the Autograph, sitting at the top of our core downtown, is a shining example of that. And so, yes, it's expensive, and yes, we have to continue to tackle the process, because time is money, and so we need to expedite that, and we need to work on tax policy. But we also need to recognize that we have great bones that actually can be very much a part of the rebuild and this residential renewal.
Yeah, I would just add to that, and I wish somebody had told me how hard it was going to be when we started doing it 15 years ago.
I think I heard it from you. I actually heard it from you.
Yeah, no, but it is hard. And it is not, now it's the flavor of the month. Every city wants to convert their vacant office buildings. We have better office buildings, to Eric's point, because they were largely built before the 1960s. And so our footprints work. But we don't have a demand problem per se. These buildings fill. We do have a supply problem in that it is enormously costly to do, and the incentive pool that used to exist to do it, some of the very tools I use for the David Whitney or the Metropolitan Building or the Plaza don't exist any longer. And so if we're serious about it, we have to put more resources at it.
Eric, have we done the right thing? When you look at everything that is coming up and you see what is also coming ahead, the music hall that's going to be doing, there's also, different projects, and I want to make sure I'm going to go down the Life Science Innovation Building at the jail site. That's going to be groundbreaking. The Gordie Howe Bridge is going to be opening up in the fall. And when we look at all of this, it's like, did we all do the right things? I mean, are they on the right way?
I think you're answering that question because you know, if you look at not only what has already occurred but what is coming, we definitely have built a foundation that is doing the right thing. We have spent a lot of time really thinking about what are the important things. We've had amazing city leadership that has really guided us through some very, very challenging decisions and times, but now we're at places where we have historic low crime rates. We have population growth in the city of Detroit. We have people returning to the city not only to live but to visit. You know, over 120,000 people per week are coming into the city of Detroit, I mean per day, just to understand and to experience what's happening.
It was just listed in the New York Times as one of the places to visit in 2025.
New York Times, USA Today, I mean, you know, you name it. Everyone is recognizing that Detroit has not only done something right, but is also a living laboratory for what can be done right.
Sandy, so when people call you up and say, oh, so what's going on in Detroit in the metro area in growth and relocating? And
I ask them how much time they have.
Are you still getting those calls? And,
oh, absolutely.
And what changes for you in the answer here in 2025?
You know, I would have thought that, you know, coming out of bankruptcy and kind of the successful grand bargain, I thought that might be a 24-month kind of phenomenon. Mm-hmm. No. It has just continued, and it's because the positive momentum, you know, both driven by, you know, our city government, but primarily by our business community and our developers, just keeps pouring on the gas. More and more interesting things keep happening. And, you know, to Eric's point, you know, when you bring 250,000 people down for the NFL draft, and even, you know, Roger Goodell is blown away by how well we did, and everyone gets to see the great Detroit skyline when the Lions play. I mean, you can't replace that. I mean, you can't put a price tag on that. We're still the talk of the, not just talk of the nation, we're talk of the world.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, though, when we do see those beauty shots of the skyline and that question of if that skyline's going to change a little bit with the Rensen, that's got to be a conversation that you guys are having in small circles that maybe I'd love to eavesdrop in on, Eric.
It is definitely hanging out there, but you know, I have a lot of faith, like, you know, what we've done in the past. There will be a decision that's made that really is the right thing for Detroit at this time on the riverfront.
Yeah,
that's pretty exciting.
We've got the Hudson's, one part of the Hudson's building that will be opening up this year. David, you get the last word on what we should look forward to.
Well, I think we should look forward more to the same, as Sandy said, and I agree. We have nothing to fear from this discussion about the Renaissance Center. This town invented commercial adaptive reuse in the 21st century, and I think we'll get to the right answer on that.
David Dorita, Eric Larson, and Sandy Barua, thanks so much for being with me. It's good to see all of you.
Thank you.
Great.
All righty, coming up next, Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel joins me to explain how her office is going to be investigating the Oxford High School shooting 3 years later and what families can really expect to find out. Stay with me. We'll be right back. Welcome back. It was over 3 years ago that a 15-year-old opened fire at Oxford High School, killing 4 students and wounding 7 others and terrorizing a community. The shooter now in prison, his parents, James and Jennifer Crumbly, in prison for involuntary manslaughter. The Oakland County prosecutor has said no more charges will be coming from her office, but a state investigation from the Attorney General's office is just beginning. With me now is Michigan's AG, Dana Nessel, to talk about Oxford, and I appreciate your time. It's good to see you.
Good to see you.
As we move into the new year, and I know that you have so much going on in your office, we've covered Oxford extensively, and I thought it was very valuable to be able to sit down and see how this could actually work, because when you look back, and you had asked the school board back in 2022 for a state investigation, and they turned you down. The Oakland County prosecutor has said no more charges will be coming from her office, but now she has said she can turn the case over to you, and that happened in the fall. Where can you realistically take this case, and what are you looking for? What will your office do?
I think more than anything, it's to see from a policy perspective, you know, what can be gleaned from these events. You know, I think we can all point the finger and say that lots of things went wrong during the course of this incident. And for me, it's about how do we make sure that some of the mistakes that were made during the Oxford shooting don't happen in the future in schools around the state of Michigan. So that's going to be my priority.
So is it necessarily prosecution, or just looking, or just issuing a report saying, much like the guidepost report that came out that the school district put forth, saying were maybe some of the missteps?
Yeah, well, I think it remains to be seen. One of the things that Guidepost Solutions and Oakland County complained about is that they weren't really able to complete that investigation. So we're going to try our best to sort of cover any areas that, previously were not looked into, and to see what we can find. And at the end, to maybe work with the legislature to see if we can come up with better policies, better procedures to put into place to make sure that each and every child in every school around the state of Michigan is properly protected.
Can you explain to us how many people would work on a case like this? Do you take the information from the Oakland County Prosecutor's Office? And with the Guidepost Solutions investigation, they asked a lot of people to speak with them, but only a small amount actually sat down and gave them their version of events that day. Can you compel people to talk with you, or explain for us how that will all work?
Well, firstly, we're not looking to do anything that's duplicative of what's already been done by Oakland County or by this private entity that's looked into it. In terms of what our ability is to get cooperation from witnesses, we don't technically have greater authority than the Oakland County Prosecutor's Office or the Oakland County Sheriff's Department did, but our hope is that we'll be able to use other types of mechanisms to get people to cooperate. And obviously, if people are afraid that they're going to be prosecuted, and that's the reason why they refuse to talk, or they're concerned about civil liability, perhaps that's why they didn't cooperate. Frankly, some of the statutes of limitations for civil suits have now passed. And the Oakland County prosecutor herself made it clear that there were not going to be criminal charges, or at least that she didn't see any evidence that would sustain criminal charges. So we're hoping that through our investigation, perhaps we'll be able to get interviews that they weren't able to obtain, and to get some more information about what happened. Again, with the mindset that we just want to make sure that nothing like this happens in the state of Michigan again, at least not in the way it did in Oxford.
You talk about speaking with people that maybe haven't been able to speak before. I want to get specific because the families have talked about maybe the failure of two people specifically, a guidance counselor and a dean of students that day. There has been conversation that the Oakland County Prosecutor's Office had some kind of provision that in order to cooperate with them on the involuntary manslaughter cases against the parents and the shooter themselves, that they were immune from any kind of prosecution in speaking with them. Can you explain that?
Well, we're going to have to get these documents, right? I will say I've heard some back and forth about, what the true nature of those proffer agreements were or were not. I know that Prosecutor McDonald has said that they're not true immunity deals, but I haven't seen them yet. So one of the things that we're doing right now is we are corresponding with the Oakland County Prosecutor's Office to make sure that we get each and every document that they have. We want to see it for ourselves. We might actually have to interview some of these staffers at the Oakland County Prosecutor's Office so we can get a fuller picture of that. But I think once we have all of their documentation, we've spoken to them, we've reviewed all of the evidence of the case and all the reports that perhaps were not admissible in the case, we'll have a better idea. But again, the goal is to talk to as many people as possible, not necessarily with the mindset of prosecution or civil liability, but really, again, to prevent further incidences from occurring.
This is so painful for the families still to this day who are looking for some kind of justice, they still say, and some kind of answers there. How do you answer a family member who is still in pain from an incident like this?
At the end of the day, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to bring back anyone's child who was lost during the course of the incident. I think all we can do is to assure them that we've looked into absolutely everything we possibly can about how this occurred, and to make sure that we have mechanisms in place to prevent such an incident from happening in the future.
Let's talk about funding for this investigation. You've talked about there might not be money to really go deep on this.
Yeah, so Guidepost Solutions, for instance, right, this private entity was paid $2.7 million just to do their portion of the investigation. In previous cases where we've had extensive investigations in our office, whether you're talking about the Flint criminal cases, whether you're talking about the Larry Nassar investigations, our clergy abuse investigation, we're doing a murdered and missing Indigenous people investigation. We've always been provided some sort of funding from the legislature, because of the amount of staff that it takes, the number of investigators and prosecutors and analysts.
So you're looking for the legislature to be able to step forward maybe and give some funding for this investigation?
That's our hope. We were hoping for a supplemental appropriation during lame duck, and that, of course, did not occur. We're going to be making a future request of the new legislature now that they've started their new session. I don't know what we'll get or we won't get. That might dictate how expansive the investigation could be, or even how long it will take. But, you know, we're determined to do as much as we possibly can with the resources that we have.
I want to switch topics briefly before we finish up here and talk a little bit about Line 5. You are back in court at the end of the month, and this has been something that you have pledged since the campaign trail, and you filed a lawsuit in 2019 to shut down Enbridge's Line 5 here in the state of Michigan, which goes under the Straits of Mackinac. What do you think this litigation will bring up, and how positive are you that you're actually going to be able to do that?
Well, we've maintained from the very beginning, when we filed this lawsuit back in 2019, that these are state law claims and they deserve to be litigated in state court. Now, unfortunately, throughout the course of all this time, Enbridge has engaged in a lot of gamesmanship, and we've been back and forth to federal court. And we went all the way to the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals in Cincinnati, and we got a 3-0 decision by some very conservative judges, by the way, that this case did indeed belong in state court. So we are pursuing that in the Ingham County Circuit Court. We've had motions for summary disposition that have been pending now, again, for many, many years. We filed new briefs on these cases, and we're going to have a hearing in short order. So we're hopeful that we'll have some positive momentum and traction on this case. Again, this is a 71-year-old pipeline that was never intended to run for even half that length of time. It's certainly no less dangerous now than it was when we filed in 2019. But what we're looking for is that in orderly fashion that Line 5 will be shut down so that it doesn't pose a risk any further to the Great Lakes, but it's done so in a way where we make sure that nobody's energy source is compromised. And that's what all the studies have shown us, is that there shouldn't be a problem with that as long as we're doing it in an orderly fashion. The problem is if there's a rupture, it'll be immediate, and it'll cause a lot of disruptions.
Enbridge says, of course, they're working on that tunnel to protect the pipeline, but we'll be watching to see what happens once you get back in court later on in the month. Michigan's Attorney General Dana Nessel, it's good to see you. Thanks for being with me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up next, the pictures of the week and a farewell to President Carter. Stay with me. And finally, we've seen so many powerful pictures this week. We live in a video world, especially here on television and streaming, but still photography captures images that stay with us. And I wanted to share with you some from this week. Of course, the devastation from the wildfires in Los Angeles continues to grow. And when you see the scope of what has been lost, lives, homes, communities, the questions surrounding resources and prevention will reverberate for months to come. And also this week, a rare sight to see all of the living presidents sitting in a row and honoring the life of President Jimmy Carter. His funeral on Thursday full of all the moments. And I'm sure we're all kind of wishing to know exactly what was being talked about in that pew. But the funeral itself, a moving tribute to a president and a life well lived. I hope you've had a great week. Next week, we are leading up to President Trump's inauguration. We're going to be talking about that and so much more. So I hope you join me then. For all of us at Flashpoint and Local 4, I'm Christy McDonald. You take care of yourself.